Welcome back to Season 2 of That's So Second Millennium, the podcast where we explore how science and religion can coexist, because they can, and what they can produce together if we let them, because your third millennium will be a whole lot brighter if you do. Your hosts are Bill Schmidt and me, Paul Giesting. Welcome back. I'm going to give the actual introduction in the main episode. I just wanted to give you a brief apology here. Zencastr, Zencastr. We've been having enormous technical difficulty with Zencastr. Basically, my co-host could not hear me, and therefore we've gone back and recorded this on our good old reliable freeconferencecall.com, which is a beautiful, rugged piece of software, and it sounds like a telephone conversation because it is basically a telephone conversation. So apologize for the audio quality, but we have Stephen Barr back on the podcast, and he's got some great stuff to talk about in this episode, so we hope that will cause you to look past the audio quality.
Welcome back to That's So Second Millennium. This is episode 59. We are privileged to have Stephen Barr back on the podcast, professor in physics at the University of Delaware and the president of the Society of Catholic Scientists. Welcome back, Steve.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yes, thanks for being with us, Steve.
So, and this is Paul Giesting and my co-host Bill Schmidt, and we're talking with Steve about the upcoming. We want to do a couple of episodes here about the Society of Catholic Scientists and the upcoming conference that they are holding in early June at the University of Notre Dame. So the subject of the conference is going to be, what does it mean to be human? And we're gonna try to do a little bit. We've talked to Steve before about the general context of why we should be Catholic scientists, but we thought it would be nice to give a little backstory in terms of how the society has gotten founded and what stories have gone on, what conversations and planning and serendipity have happened on the way to the society existing and having, as it has now, over 1,000 members, and planning to hold its third conference. So how did this get started?
Well, it's something that was in the back of my mind for many years. Atheists who are in science, famous people, scientific atheists, get a lot of press and they're very vocal. And you don't hear much from scientists who are religious, let alone Catholic. And so in the back of my mind, for many years, was the idea that Catholic scientists should organize and be more visible. But I didn't do anything about it. I was very busy with my, physics research and being a professor and so on. And but what precipitated, but over the years, even though this really was just sort of a dream, I would ask whenever I encountered a Catholic scientist, usually a physicist because I'm in physics, I would ask them if they knew of any others. And I made a little list, of about 50 or 80 Catholic scientists for the day, if the day ever came when we started an organization.
Right.
But what precipitated it was really something accidental in a way. So I do a lot of writing and on science and religion, a lot of speaking, and I'd given an interview to a Catholic magazine, and I got an email one day, I guess it was 4 years ago, from a very eminent astrophysicist at Cornell. Jonathan Lunine, and he's a member of the National Academy of Sciences, and which the highest you can get in science, barring sort of a Nobel Prize. So he said, I knew his name, of course, but I'd never had any interactions with him. But he said he had read this interview I'd given and was quite interested in it. And he said that he was a Catholic convert. He's of Jewish ancestry, Jewish background. And he had converted about 10 years ago to the Catholic faith. And he said, so we started talking back and forth, and he said that his pastor up at Cornell had suggested to him the idea of an organization of Catholic scientists. And I said to Jonathan, well, that's funny because I've been thinking about that for many years. And he said, why don't we get together? Why don't we join forces and do it together? And so finally, that was the kick in the rear end that I needed.
Yes.
to actually do something.
Exactly.
And so it was sort of a little bit of serendipity that he had read this interview, and his pastor had talked to him about this, and so on. And so that was and then we quickly gathered a board, and off we were. That we started in summer of 2016. So anyway, that was one of a number of things that one of the things that's kind of I've thought about this. If I had tried to start something, or if anyone had tried to start such an organization, say 20 years ago, it would have been, I think, more difficult. There are a number of sort of things that have happened that sort of seem to put a little wind in our sails, or sort of make it easier than I expected it to be. And I think of those as either providential or serendipitous, as the case may be.
Yeah. Could you call out a few of those things for us?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, we were able to gather. I should mention the board first. There are 7 scientists on the board, and we were quickly able to gather a very good board. And 3 of the 7 scientists on the board are very recent converts. So there's one thing. 10 or 20 years ago, they wouldn't have been those people. Aside from Jonathan Lunine, another Karen Oberg, that's sort of the American pronunciation. She's Swedish, and she became a Catholic, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. From a nominally Lutheran background. She's a young sort of hotshot, rising star in her field, astrochemistry and astrophysics at Harvard. She just got tenure at Harvard a couple of years ago, and so another member of our board who's not a convert, but he's been very active in science, religion matters, writing, speaking. He's a very dynamic speaker. Is Father Nicanor Austriaco, a Dominican priest. He has a PhD from MIT in biology, and so he was out there. And so there were all these people that were out there that we could, draw upon to form a rather considerable board. So that's one example.
It had not struck me until you pointed it out that you had the symbolic number 7 people on the board. I don't know if that's intentional or not. But.
No, that was not. Actually, that's the first I've even thought about that. No, but it's just we didn't want too many because it would be it would be a little unwieldy.
It's a workable size.
It seems a workable size. Another thing, as far as how I got into this. I was doing my physics and being a professor, and that was my career. And as I said, I didn't think I'd have time. I'd always thought that when I retired, I might start doing things on science and religion. But at a certain point in the mid-'90s, First Things magazine, which was founded by the late, great Father John Newhouse, they started encouraging me to write about science and religion. I had sent them an article, and they liked it, and they started encouraging me. So I started writing a lot for them, and that led to me writing a couple of books, and also giving talks all over the country, many talks. And that actually was good preparation for our society, because it gave me a visibility among Catholic scientists. Many of them had read things I'd written. Many of them had heard me speak. And so I developed a lot of contacts with Catholic scientists, in addition to that list I was developing. And so when we started in the summer of 2016, I was able to reach out to a lot of these people, and we were quickly, our first 100 members or so, right off the bat were from these personal contacts. So that sort of accelerated the process. As I said, if I tried to do this cold, if we had tried to do this 20 years ago, it would have been more difficult. But so we've had a number of things that sort of help propel us, get us going quickly.
That's great.
And I should also mention, again, I see the hand of Providence in certain things here. We have had tremendous help from a number of Catholic organizations, some of which also are rather recent. So, for example, our first conference, which was held in Chicago, we couldn't possibly have done it. We had the conference only 9 months after we started. So
I was amazed by that.
Yeah, I was kind of I was kind of in a little bit of I was quite nervous about it because when we started planning the conference, we had 100 members, and so we were trying. I analogize it to throwing a football and then running to catch it. We were trying to. We were trying to recruit members at the same time we're planning the conference. And we're trying to recruit members so we'll have enough members so there'll be someone to go to the conference. Well, it worked out. It worked out, thank God. But, yeah. So go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say people must have been absolutely thrilled that such an organization was forming, or else they wouldn't have had the early energy to respond quickly to the first conference.
Well, yes.
Did you find that sentiment?
Well, yes. So we had about 330, I think it was, members at the time, the day of the first conference started, and about a quarter of those people showed up at the conference. So I think that's a reflection of, and they were very excited. My impression at the conference was that there was a lot of enthusiasm among people, young and old. All ages were represented.
Nice.
Because, I say it's sort of like a fish who's been put for the first time in water. Many of us who are Catholic, the way it ought to, many of us who are Catholic scientists, we're moving around. Most of the people in our environment are not religious, but, so this was the first time in their lives that many of these people had been in a large room full of fellow scientists who were also believing Catholics, and I think there was just a huge sense of this is the way it ought to be.
Exactly.
But,
yeah.
Now let me just go back to the organizations that helped us. So the first conference really was an enormous amount of the work organizing it was done by the Lumen Christi Institute, and they only started in 20 years ago, and have grown to be quite a intellectual powerhouse, and they're very experienced now in running conferences in Chicago, and so they did all the logistical work, and they did a brilliant job. And so if the Lumen Christi Institute hadn't been there, they said that's a new endeavor in itself, we couldn't have pulled it off. Our second conference was at Catholic U. And there, again, it turns out the Dean of Science, and that's a good place to have it, Washington, D.C., and the Dean of Science, the new Dean of Science at that time at Catholic U was a member of our organization. He's an experimental particle physicist, Aaron Dominguez. And so he invited us to have the second conference there and opened a lot of doors there, facilitating it. And now our third conference, which will be at Notre Dame, we're getting a lot of help from the McGrath Institute for Church Life there. And that organization is recently, only in the last, 5 or 10 years, gotten very heavily interested in science and religion. And that's become a major part of their activities. Again, just in time.
Right.
And so we in fact, we're going to have our headquarters at McGrath going forward. And so they've been great. So all of these things have happened independently of each other, and somehow all have facilitated this the starting and the growth of our organization. So as I said, if we had tried to do something like this 20 years ago, I think it would have been really, really hard. But anyway. Thank goodness we had a lot of help.
Yes.
Yes,
indeed. Yeah. Well, and that's I mean, I just think about your comment earlier about the enthusiasm of people finding out they don't have to be a lone wolf, the only Catholic scientist that they know,
right?
And living in that sense of isolation. I think a particularly poignant passage of Scripture for me has always been, and I think we just read it yesterday or today in the daily Mass, the one about the deacon Philip and the Ethiopian. So the Holy Spirit, of course, blows Philip into the path of this, court official rolling across Judea or the desert or Gaza. Actually, it's the land of the Philistines, and has this conversation with him about the prophet Isaiah that turns into this is who this Jesus of Nazareth was. The guy gets baptized. Philip gets whisked away. And I'm like, what happens to this Ethiopian after that?
You're not told.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I hope somebody followed him
saying.
Eventually.
These encounters, these chance encounters are often very, momentous.
Yes.
And so this has happened over and over. So I that fills me with hope that maybe we're not trying to do something that's impossible, that we keep having things come in our path at the time we need them. So
yes.
And there's also been a lot more done on science and religion in recent years. I don't know whether it's in response to the new atheists or what, but I would say 20 years ago, there was almost nothing written, at least in English, on defending religious belief written by scientists. And at a high scientific level, and so there's a lot more literature out there. There are more people. There are more people blogging about this. The Vatican Vatican Observatory has really upgraded their website, and they do a lot of things on this. So we're hoping actually to not to work in isolation, but have our organization really networking with a lot of other people who are working in this area, and have a symbiotic relationship with others.
That's the way to actually be successful at this. Yeah. Well, and fellowship is at the core of Christianity anyway. That's
right.
We're about being together as the body of Christ.
Right.
Boy,
and so one of the things I think you mentioned it to me the other day is the fact that we have a lot of we have not a lot, but we have some non-Catholic scientists speak at our conferences, and that's been our conferences are primarily for our members who are Catholic scientists or Catholic scholars, theologians, philosophers, historians who are affiliated with us or connected with us, and it's for fellowship among Catholic scientists. But we do have at our conferences, though most of the talks are by our members or people affiliated. We invite eminent and non-Catholics to give talks also, who have exciting things to say. We're Catholic scientists, but we don't want to just be talking among ourselves. So at each conference, we have some really exciting non-Catholic scientists speak.
And so if you go back to as I recall, the topic of the first conference was origins. So both
origins,
physical universe and life and human life. Who was the non-Catholic speaker that you at that conference?
We had two. We had two of them. One of them, who gave the keynote address, is a very eminent cosmologist. He's an English cosmologist. He's a fellow of the Royal Society, which is very, very prestigious.
You may have heard of the Royal Society, dear listener. Yes.
All right.
Well, that's sort of that's really very, very a big feather in your cap to be a fellow of the Royal Society. His name is John Barrow, and so he gave an excellent talk. He's a Christian, not a Catholic, but he is a believing Christian. And the other talk that was very good, a non-Catholic speaker, was Robert Berwick, and he gave a talk on the origins of the human, the origins of the human language, and the distinctiveness of human beings as the only creatures on Earth that have language in the true sense, and it was a brilliant talk. He'd written a book with Noam Chomsky on this, which I think was epic-making book a few years ago. And he gave it a really exciting talk on how human language, or at least some aspects of how it appeared. Anyway, so that was at our second conference. We had only one non-Catholic speaker, as I recall, and that was a brilliant young logician from Harvard, and he gave a talk. Peter Kellner, and he's not. I don't even know if he's religious or not. I suspect not. But he gave a very good talk. I mean, on a very important subject. There has been an idea called the Lucas Penrose argument that has been taken very seriously. machines cannot possibly reproduce human thought. Human thought transcends anything that a mere computer could do. And so it's a very important argument, and he's sort of the world expert on this, and he was gracious enough to come and give a talk on that subject. He had his conclusions were sort of ambiguous. He didn't. He felt that the argument was not rigorous, but anyway, so we leaven our conferences with some really exciting talks by non-Catholics. And we have two. Maybe I can talk about this later, but we have two non-Catholics speaking at our upcoming conference as well.
As we'll want to segue into that here soon, into focusing on the upcoming conference. Just one last thing before we leave the subject of the previous ones, though. How did you come up with the ideas for the topics? For the overall focus for the conference? Do you sort of look around and say, hey, we could get these people to speak, and we could forge this topic around it, or do you do the topic first?
Well, the board discusses it. The first one, there's a whole list of topics that are sort of important in the science religion area, and so we're sort of in a way taking them one at a time. The first one was sort of obvious. Well, we wanted one that was broad because we have physics people, biologists. We have a broad spectrum of the sciences, and so we wanted a topic where we could have things from all kinds of science. So origins was good. Also, it fit in with the fact that it was our first conference. It was the origins of our group. But we could have the origin of the universe, the origin of stars and so on, of the solar system, the origin of language. We had evolution, so the origin of life and the origin of species. So it drew on all the different areas. The second one, we argued back and forth, and we settled on, we decided to go with the human mind. Is the human mind in materialism? Can materialism, the idea that everything is just physics, which a lot of atheists embrace, can that account for the human mind? And so that was, and that turned out that conference was heavily physics oriented, curiously enough. So we decided to go with something a little more humanistic in our third conference.
Right.
And so we're talking about the nature of the human person. So, and the next one we're hoping to do on extraterrestrial life and communications. So that will be in 2020. So we discuss it a lot at our board meetings, and a lot of factors go into it, including who we could get to talk, who are the interesting people to speak.
Yeah. I can only imagine you've already talked to Guy Consolmagno about extraterrestrials.
He'll certainly be at that conference, I'm sure. Jonathan Lunine, actually, who is on our board, our vice president, is one of the leading authorities in the world on what's called astrobiology. He's written textbooks on it. Astrobiology is the study of the conditions you need in other places in the universe to have life. So,
astrobiology is a fascinating field in terms of, in a very real sense, is the science of something that we haven't discovered.
Exactly, but we might discover.
We might, and what are we going to do to prepare for it? Right. It's somewhat reminiscent of crystallography, where the mathematics for it was all invented in the 19th century before anyone could even do an X-ray diffraction experiment, and then it turned out to work.
And it worked, right? And the interest. I mean, the thing is, about half the people in the world, at least, believe there is extraterrestrial intelligent life, and so even if we haven't yet found it, it's already an important issue for many.
It's a major cultural topic. Yeah.
How does that fit into the salvation history and our faith?
Yeah.
So I think that will be exciting too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I have one more question. One more question before we go on to the upcoming conference. I'd like to know whether you've personally been surprised by the rapid growth that the society has experienced. Paul mentioned that I think it's over 1,000 people now. Has that been largely by word of mouth, and do you think there's a lot more growth potential still to come? And maybe we can tie that in just to a little note to people, whether they can still sign up as members in time for the conference that's imminent.
If they wait. If they do it very quickly, the answer is yes. The growth was a surprise to me. In fact, it has been. It's sort of like the gospel last Sunday with the net with 153 fish in it.
Yes.
I'm just hoping the net doesn't break. I mean,
yes.
And I'm not sure we have the strength to pull it ashore. I mean, the thing is, it's grown to the point that it's created a lot of work.
Yeah.
And we have to start getting some more hands on deck to do that work. So we weren't quite expecting it to grow this fast.
I think in the book of Exodus or Leviticus they talk about the leaders of 10s and 50s, and it sounds like it's at the stage where you need to start having some of those people.
Right.
Has the growth occurred both in numbers and in the diversity of the disciplines represented?
It's actually been pretty consistent. I mean, we're sort of half in sort of the physical sciences, like chemistry and physics and so on, and half in the life sciences. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of it seems to be a fairly constant rate. And it's to answer your earlier question, it's now mostly word of mouth. That is not us doing anything, but people just apply through the website. That's how almost all the people join. So to begin with, of course, to prime the pump to get it jump started, we sent out lots of invitations to people we knew, but now it's sort of developed a life of its own. I think there's a lot of potential for growth. The main problem is getting the word out there to Catholic scientists, because there's no easy way to find them and contact them. And the other thing is, we really have tremendous growth potential in other parts of the world. 80% of our members are in the United States, but I'm sure we can get at least an equal number in Europe and Latin America and Asia and other places. But we haven't really made a push to do that yet, and so eventually we will. And I expect that we can double, triple our members that way.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. I mean, once this thing grows to anything like its full potential, it would have over 10,000 members easily.
I hope that's sort of actually roughly what I think is the long-term potential. Doing some back-of-the-envelope calculations, and there are a lot of Catholic scientists. Not a lot, but there are some who are eligible, who are practicing. They're Catholic who haven't taken the trouble. I know I've invited them. They haven't joined. I've been told by priests that he told me, if you're getting half the people to join, that's great, because when he's experienced, when you try to recruit people to do anything, you usually get you're lucky to get a third or a quarter of them.
Right.
A lot of people are not joiners,
Yes. No, especially in the modern world. This is
even though our dues are ridiculously low.
Yes. Just so you know, I'll make sure to put this. We'll make sure to cut this into the first episode out of this interview, so that we'll get the yes, you can join. Yes, you can still go to the meeting. As of I think May 15th, I think is the deadline. So this should go up on May 13th. So. Dear listener, please do that if you're interested.
And if you join, you can also get. We're planning to have the talks live streamed. So if you're not in time to join to go to the conference, if you're a member, you can, for free, you can have the talks of the conference live streamed if all goes according to plan.
Yes. Yes. Best laid plans last until contact with the enemy or with the consultant, one of the two, however you want to.
I probably jinxed this already just by
mentioning it. We don't want to be superstitious about that. Although, if you wanted to offer a few more Hail Marys, dear listener, for having the audiovisual equipment work, that would be greatly appreciated.
Right. As a physicist and as a Catholic, I don't really believe in jinxes. Okay.
Right. Exactly. Yes. Right. But we do believe in prayer. So.
Right. We do.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. You can email a link to this episode at thatsosecondmillennium.net, share the post for this episode from our Facebook page, or you can use your podcast app's built-in sharing feature.